get started. So my name is Andrus. This is the Baking Steel Test Kitchen. We've got Craig, Chef, Fresh Chef Craig. You can hear his voice. He's kind of helping us with all of our questions and in the background. It's hard to get to us on the split screen, so we find this is a great way to start. Today we are doing a simple bread class. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're getting a ton of questions, so we thought that, hey, let's do it. These classes have been really great. We love your feedback. It's super helpful. And today we just thought we'd do some breads, right? And so we're going to have probably some pauses along the way when you guys can ask your questions, and Chef Craig may pause me what I'm doing, and we'll pause and answer those questions. But then maybe at the end we can jump in, and if anybody has any questions, we're here for you. Sound good? All right. Let's make some bread. So I thought I would start first. One of my favorite things to do, and it's a weekly thing with my kids in particular. If we have like raviolis or something at home, we're always making, I always make fresh breads with that. And what I do is, because bread's flour, salt, water, yeast, I always have my doughs in my delis in the fridge, usually 3, 4, 5, or 6 days old. And what I do with these is I'm going to make like what we call like a shortcut ciabatta bread. And I'm going to show you how I do that and bake it in class here before we get started. So these delis are super handy. And what I'm going to do is, this is exactly what I do when my kids are here for bread. And now my surface here, I can flour my surface up, right, to make it a little bit non-stick. I can actually also use like a little bit of oil if I wanted to. And I take the bread out of the deli, just like this. We got a little olive oil here. So I take my dough out, I just plop it down. And now, like, can you guys see this, Chef? You can see this pretty good? I'm gonna just literally stretch this out like an accordion to about, 6 or 7 inches. Now this dough has been sitting at room temp for about maybe 2 hours. So it's already at room temperature. And now what I'm gonna do, take my pizza peel, I'm gonna dust it with a little bit of semolina flour, okay? And just like I would launch a pizza, I'm gonna place this on my peel. I'm gonna see how I can slide it. I'm gonna turn my oven up, okay? I'm gonna launch it in. My oven's at like 450, close your oven. And next what I'll do is I'll put my timer on because I don't want to get distracted because of class. I'm going to bake this for about 8 or 9 minutes and then take a peek. Okay, so I've got my timer on, 8 or 9 minutes. That's on the bottom steel, which is at 450 degrees. After 8 minutes, it's going to be almost done. I might elevate a little bit and finish cooking it for about probably 12 to 15 minutes total. But I'm going to have this like incredible like dinner roll almost, or just bread for family dinner. It's beautiful, it's simple. It kind of talks about everything else we're gonna do in class today is introduce you guys to some really basic breads that we can use and make in our home ovens using a baking steel, a pizza stone, shoot, even a sheet tray. Although we're impartial, we think baking steel's gonna make the best breads. That's us, that's how we roll. Make sense so far? All right, so let's talk bread. I'm gonna make a dough here, a fresh dough. And one of the questions that continuously has been coming up over the last, like, I'd say month is that, because we're all baking more, which is great. And however, the dough is, our pizza dough, our 72-hour dough in particular, is a 70% hydration dough, which makes that a wet dough. It's not a pizza dough 101. It's almost like an advanced type style pizza dough. So it's really hard to work with, but it's worth it. However, to make it a little simpler, what we can do is reduce that water content. So I'm gonna go from say 70% to call it 60%. And that's really basic math. And all that means is that Flour is the main ingredient. So the amount of water based on the flour is my water percentage. So in other words, if I have 500 grams of flour and I want it 70% hydrated dough, 70% of 500 is 350. So I use typically 350 grams of water in my pizza dough. But to make that easier to work with, I'm going to reduce that hydration to 60%. So I've got 60% water today to make my basic bread dough and to make it a little bit easier to work with. Now, I pre-measured everything because I'll repeat this again. It's definitely worth repeating, is that when I make bread to get to 70% or 60%, you need to dial in your recipe by measuring your ingredients. And I love the scales for that. There's no other way to do it. To eyeball it is really tricky. Takes, I don't even know if you can do it, to be honest. It takes a lot of practice. And flour is also very hard to come by. As we go to the stores, the shelves are literally wiped out. So we recommend bread flour. However, we understand that we can't always find it. So if you can get your hands on all-purpose flour, go for it. And if you guys need a flour, get the bag here. A flour recommendation, I know centralmilling.com has some flour available. You have to go almost every day. Another brand that we've been loving is called Janie's Mill. That's Janies mill.com. And they have a bunch of flour. They have these great resealable bags that makes it really easy to work with, also available. But when we're making breads, if you can't find bread flour, all-purpose flour is awesome, especially for like a 24-hour bread. So don't be adventurous. Have some fun. Like, don't feel like you have to use bread flour. Toss some different stuff in there. I might throw some spelt in there. Whatever you can get your hands on, just try it and experiment and see what happens. There's no right or wrong answer. If you follow these basic principles, you'll see what we're talking about. All right, so makes sense? So we've got our flour here. I'm gonna add my yeast in first. And I want you guys to, when you guys are mixing your ingredients together, treat each ingredient individually. So I take my yeast, and I dump it literally right into my flour, and I'm gonna whisk that up, okay? So I wanna talk about the salt aspect a little bit here next. Is the salt, we don't wanna have the salt come in direct contact with the yeast. It might kill the yeast, so it won't rise as much. So we keep everything separate. I've already whisked my yeast in. I feel pretty confident I can add my salt in and whisk that in next, and that'll be fine. Another option is to take my salt, I'm not gonna do this today, I can put my salt into my water and let it dissolve. So in other words, that might take 5 or 10 minutes to dissolve my salt in the water, which I'm not gonna do now. But that's another way to assure that my yeast is gonna stay active and alive and simple, okay? Simple formula. I'm just gonna dump it into my flour, whisk it up, and that's 16 grams of salt, and that's fine sea salt, which I cannot find right now, so I'm using a coarse sea salt. When I get this from Whole Foods, you can see that there, it's coarse, so it's the grind are a little bit bigger. That's fine, it's okay, it's not gonna hurt anything. Water, I personally drink out of a filter, so I cook with filtered water. Personal preference, the water in my town is not awesome, so I like to clean it. We use a reverse osmosis water filter. It really tastes great. I just essentially dump my water into the bucket. I've already whisked everything together. I take my GIR spatula, hello friends in GIR, and I love these because they clean really easy versus like a wooden spoon. It's pretty stiff too, which is nice. And I'm just gonna whisk all my ingredients together. You guys follow me so far? Once I get the initial water and flour combined. I'm going to dump it onto my counter here. Take a rubber spatula, also GIR. We are not affiliated with those guys, so just like their products. I'm going to scrape out my bowl. And now I'm going to knead. I'm going to knead this flour and yeast and water and salt together for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Scrape off that. Using a bench scraper to get underneath it, I'm just going to lightly press down into this mixture and knead. I'm going to knead this for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Try to keep everything contained. I like to scrape underneath it as I'm going, just so I get all that table flour, from the recipe incorporated together. You can see it's forming one big mass of dough, which is awesome. How am I doing, Chef? Done this a few times. And all I'm trying to do is make sure I get all of those dough clumps out. And I do that by just kind of pressing in. All right, I'm going to pause just for a second. Pause here. I'm going to pick you guys up and show you guys. Turn that timer off first. I'm going to take you guys for a spin inside the oven to look at this bread that I've been baking. Can I turn this thing around? Yes. You can see my bread. It's hard to see, but underneath, it's getting there, right? So what I'm going to do, we got these new baking steel. Can you see that? Baking steel bracelets, which is really cool, by the way. One, you can wear them, but two, I can just take my loaf, place it on top, and now I'm going to get airflow underneath here, and that's going to help cook this bread entirely, and I don't need to worry about burning the bottom of the bread or getting it too dark. It's actually a really great way to get a great crust on your bread at home. It's actually unbelievable, to be honest. Don't you think, Chef? And if you don't have those bracelets, like, you can literally find something in your home something that can withstand the heat. These bracelets can go up to about 500 or 600 degrees, so it's no problem for bread or the steel. It's great. In any case, use some tongs. Metal tongs work really well. Even a coat hanger, something that elevate the bread, allow airflow, get even a better crust. Back to the dough. So I've kneaded this for about 2 minutes. I know it's that's the bulk of the dough. So I'm going to bulk ferment this. I'm putting it back into the bowl. Okay, and I'm going to cover this for maybe cover it up. And if I don't have a lid, this is called Cambro. If I don't have a lid, saran wrap, plastic wrap is fine. That's all you need. I like to do a 24-hour ferment for all of my breads. And that's if I use all-purpose flour, bread flour, any kind of combination. 24 hours is a great rule of thumb. And how I've been rolling lately with my bulk ferments is if I have 24 hours in the day, I like to do about, call it 12 hours at room temp and 12 hours in the fridge. But I always end cold in the fridge because the dough is much easier to work with when it's cold because it's very wet. Does that make sense? I hope to everybody. And let me pause there. Any questions, Chef?
Yeah, you want to go through the difference between bread and all-purpose flour, and also touch on vital wheat gluten.
Yeah, it's a great question. So bread flour, it's got a higher protein content, more glutens, right? It's stronger. It's made for breads. Those glutens will begin to break down after 24 hours. And then we love to go 2 or 3 days with the bread flour because now those glutens are really have weakened and it's a lot easier on our system to digest. When we switch, if we can't find bread flour and we're using all-purpose flour, well, guess what? The protein content is not as high. So those long ferments might not be great for all-purpose flour. So we might want to do a 24-hour ferment instead, which is great because you're still breaking it down. It's still going to have a really nice texture after 24 hours, and that's where I would stand. Now, if you can get your hands on, I don't even think we have any here, Vital Wheat Gluten, what that's going to do is add some strength into your all-purpose flour. And I think the way the math works is we add, call it 1 tablespoon or 16 grams of Vital Wheat Gluten to your batch of all-purpose flour. And what that's going to do is give your dough a little bit more strength. So potentially you can go for those longer ferments, 2-3 days. Again, my strike zone is at least 24 hours, but we find 1 to 4 days to be ideal and awesome. You can see the difference and feel the difference in those fermentation times. Is that cool?
Can you just go over again the recipe you just made?
Yes, great question. So, yep. So we did 500 grams of flour. We did 16 grams of salt, 1 gram of yeast, and 300 grams of water. 300 grams divided by 500 is 60%. So it's a 60% hydrated dough, which is ideal. It's great for breads. It's a little bit easier to work with than, say, a 70% or even an 80% dough. The wetter they get, the more difficult they become. So if you're new to bread baking, we find, let's go with the 60% hydrated dough. Why not? Make it a little bit easier on yourself. You'll feel like an expert. Slowly increment that hydration level back up. And not to say it's better either, it's just different. And so we made a dough yesterday. So this has literally been proofing almost 24 hours. I did, you can smell that aroma of the alcohol forming. It's really nice. This was an all-purpose flour, and it was 60% hydrated. I proofed it for 8 to 10 hours at room temperature, and then overnight in the refrigerator. And I pulled this out about an hour ago. So if you make a batch of this dough, this is what you'll have the next day. Oh, I didn't put a timer on this. You check that one more time. I almost forgot the timer, Chef. That would have burned. I'm gonna add. So I added 2 more minutes to my timer, so I won't forget about it. Maybe 3 minutes, and then we'll check that. Maybe remove it, and we have our bread for the day. So back to this. So this is the one we just made. We mixed. We did the same thing here. I'm going to show you some options of things that we can make with this, and literally it's anything. It's those ciabatta breads. It's dinner rolls. It's obviously you can make pizza out of this. You can make baguettes out of this. It really depends what the texture you want to use, if that makes sense, or the shape. It's all fun. There's no right or wrong answer. I guess my thing is just be adventurous. Don't be afraid. Just try it. And in my opinion, pick baguettes, pick ciabatta, and just really study it and practice that for like a week and get really good at it, and then try another version. In other words, just practice like anything. Cool? Good, Chef?
Yeah, I got a bunch of questions whenever you want to go.
Let me make a bread. I'm gonna remove this, show you guys what I do next. These are bread baskets, proofing baskets. They're great when you have a lot of dough and you want to bake a little loaf. If you can't, you can get these on Amazon. I'm sure they're in stock now, but I might be wrong. If you can't find that, guess what? Everyone's got bowls at home, glass, ceramic bowls. You can take this and literally remove it, knead it, and place it in here next if you'd like. That also works, okay? But I like to use these baskets because we have them. So the next day I would essentially remove this. And this, again, this is not going to be as wet. It's colder, so it's not going to be stuck. I'm going to actually divide this in half. And does anybody know, Chef, I'm asking a question to you guys. Does anybody know how much, how big this dough is in weight? How would I find out how much mass I created? Does anybody know that answer? Raise your hand. We give you 10 seconds. Tell me, Chef, anybody gets that right.
Waiting.
All right, 10 seconds, guys. 5, 4,
Use a scale.
3, 2.
Use a scale.
Use a scale. Okay, that would work.
Add all the weight.
Yes, there you go. That's the real answer. Is I used 500 grams of flour. Let's see if people can get it right this time, Chef.
Yeah,
500.
17.
Yes, 500 grams of flour, 300 grams of water, 16 grams of salt, and 1 gram of yeast. What does that add up to? 817. That's how you do all your math. It's the same as what I started with. It's what I finished with. Pause there. Let's remove this bread again. Let's take a look at it. I want you guys to see. Do you see this thing? It's got a really nice crust on it. If I pick up the bottom, look at that. It's awesome. It's just hot. Okay. I think it's pretty much done. I'm going to remove it. I'll use a cloth. Boom. What I can also do is take my rubber bands and literally use those again. You guys see what I'm doing here? I've got an instant cooling rack for my bread, which is actually also pretty awesome. If you don't want to, and they're nice because you can just kind of keep them on your wrist and just slide them off quick, boom, done. Let me put it off to the side here. That's in the way, sorry. It smells really good, by the way. Smells really good. All right, so anyway, we've got our total amount of dough here, right? Is that where we left off, Chef?
Yes.
What I can do now is because it's a little tricky to handle still, even though it's wet. And what we'll do is I can just sprinkle a little bit of flour, right, carefully. And this is how I would work with a really wet dough too. I'm just gonna kind of fold it a little bit, right? And scrape underneath it. And I'll fold it again. And what this is gonna let me do is it's gonna help me kind of work it, fold it, okay? And now I've got this nice little, I don't know what you call this. I don't even know what you'd say, but this is probably 400 or so grams. This will make a nice little loaf of bread, right? Or I could take this, combine the two, right? Just like this, press them out, fold them together, right? And I got this 800 gram loaf of bread potentially, which is awesome. I'm gonna fold it like an envelope. So what I'm doing is essentially just kind of folding it in half, grabbing the other side, folding it in half. And I've got this really nice long. I'm gonna put it in this basket here. Seam side is gonna go up. I'm gonna close up the seam. I'm gonna let this sit here for maybe like 3 or 4 hours. It's gonna rest and chill out. I'm gonna cover it so it doesn't get a crust on it. And then what I'll do is I'll bake it later and make a loaf of bread. Pretty simple. Again, if I don't have this basket, I would just place the same loaf into this bowl like this and let it proof. I like the baskets. I'm a basket guy. Anybody else a basket person? All right, so that's that. I will cover this up and I'll bake this later on at 400 degrees for 20, 25 minutes. I might elevate it off the steel after 15, just so I don't burn the bottom or get it too dark. And then I can get even a better crust by elevating it a little bit. And if you don't have the bands, set of tongs would work too, right? Put those on my steel or pizza stone, whatever I have, just place my bread on top. Okay, that's gonna help airflow underneath it. Pizza stone too, by the way, anything. It's just gonna help it cook a little bit more thorough. Cool, any questions, Chef?
Yeah, you want to talk about steam inside the oven?
Yes, great question. We're gonna cover that next. So steam, since most of us don't have steam ovens at our home, raise your hand if you do. I'm coming over. we have to sometimes create steam. And Dutch oven cooking is awesome for breads, no doubt. It's great. I just think you're a little limited to some of your shapes, but it makes a really nice crust because it creates like the steam. What we like to do is create our own steam in our oven. So grab something that can go inside. We use, this is like a bar pizza pan. Stick this in the oven, put like literally, I'm talking like on the bottom shelf here, right? I put some ice cubes in, maybe 10 minutes before I launch. I'll load this thing up with ice cubes. And what that's gonna do is create a little bit of steam inside the oven. Also, when I'm baking, I can use a little mist. Let me see if I can do that. You guys see what I did there? This is like a little water. What do you call these things? Pump. It's a garden spray thing, but we've got filtered water inside of ours, and we create our little steam. So we can wet our dough first with the spray. You got your ice cubes in there. They also have what they call lava rocks, which go in, and people I know take moist towels and just kind of roll them up and place them in there with the lava rocks. And that creates a steam bath inside your oven, which is just another way to get a little bit more crust on your bread. And it works, they work really well. Right? Okay. Anybody else, Chef? And by the way, I don't always use steam. Like for this ciabatta bread, no steam at all. And it's got a nice crisp crust. It's gonna taste amazing. I eat it like twice a week.
Just want to talk again just a little bit about bulk fermentation versus like if people were going to ferment for 72 hours or longer, not staying outside the entire time. But
oh, that's a good point too. If we leave our bulk ferment longer than 24 hours, what happens is you get a tangy, sour-y flavored dough, which I personally dislike after 24 hours. I think it's almost too strong. So we move it into the fridge. For that reason, it just slows the fermentation process down, and it works beautifully. But longer than 24 hours at room temp, try it. You'll see. It got a little bit of just a tangy-ish smell that we don't love. Is that cool?
Yeah, totally.
All right. How you guys doing? Good? Yeah?
Awesome. Basically, the difference between like a 60, 70, 80% hydration and what the difference would be after a bake too.
So think like airier, crispier with more water because there's more water in the dough. So it's going to create this, this more steam inside the bread itself. So you get this, crispier dough on the inside. It's actually nice. Got more holes potentially too. Whereas a lower waters, it's going to be more of a dense bread. Like think white bread, lower hydration, like Wonder Bread. That's probably a good example. Wonder Bread.
Why is store-bought dough so hard to stretch and it contracts to its original shape?
Great pizza dough in particular.
Yeah.
We covered this actually on a blog post. It is unbelievable, the difference. If you buy store-bought dough in the plastic bags, one, read the ingredients. Make sure it's going to be somewhat, there's only 4 ingredients in dough. So if you're reading ingredients and there's like 30 ingredients, then maybe you don't want to buy that one. But let's say you do. You go to Whole Foods, you buy their dough in a plastic bag. We bring it home and we just can't stretch it out. It's like, it feels like an accordion. It go out, it goes right back in. Very elastic. So what we've done is we take those doughs, we divide them in half, and we make our dough balls. And we let those dough balls sit and rest for several hours at room temperature. And suddenly it's a completely different dough. It becomes very pliable because what we've done is we've trapped all those glutens inside with the natural gases and let this bread do its thing. And it becomes so much easier to stretch. So I urge you guys, if you buy store-bought dough, divide it in half and make dough balls. Let them rest at room temperature. Cover them up. Cover it up with a damp cloth. Don't want a skin on there. And let those things chill out for a few hours, and then make your pizza. You'll find that it stretches beautifully. It's so simple, and it's amazing how that works. I'm gonna get into shaping a baguette now. I know a lot of you guys have asked. Does that make sense, Chef? We'll go right into that. So when we're making, and by the way, I'm using pizza dough again for a baguette because I can, and it's about the same hydration. I think baguettes, we might have had a 65%. The flours might be different.
Yeah.
I think our ultimate recipe, the one we really loved, was half all-purpose flour and half bread flour. That was our ultimate recipe, but for now, hey, we're all home and I just feel like having something different. I've got pizza dough in the fridge. Let's utilize it. Let's make a baguette. I'll show you how I do that. Again, I'm gonna start out with my workstation in front of me, clean. I could use flour. I think flour is easier, but you could use a little bit of oil too if you'd like. And I remove it. Now for a baguette, oil side goes down, okay? For a baguette, it requires like 3 or 4 folds. And that fold meaning when it comes out of the bowl, we gotta kind of do our thing with the bread. So I'm gonna do, so we say 3 or 4 fold. I'm gonna do the last fold right now for you. So pretend I already did 2. I'll create like my rectangle here. And all I'm gonna do, can you see this okay, Chef?
Yep.
You guys see this good? All right. All I'm gonna do essentially is fold it over halfway, okay? And then press down lightly, okay? Take the other half like an envelope and just press it in, boom, okay? And next what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna repeat that process. Now I'm gonna go the other way, just fold it into itself, just like this. Same thing on this side, and press it in. That's my envelope fold, okay? And don't be shy, there's no right or wrong answer. All we're doing is creating a better network of the glutens. That's all that we're doing. There's really no right or wrong answer. Someone just simplified it for us. I don't know who it was, Mr. Baguette guy. He seemed to simplify it for us years ago. So that's kind of what we all do. We just fold it, okay? Then I'll put my timer on and I'll let this sit here for 20 minutes and I'm gonna repeat that process 2 or 3 times. And then we're gonna get this really nice gluten network. So we just did our 3rd fold. Let's hypothetically say that 20 minutes just went by. My dough is now ready to kind of form into a baguette. And how do I do that? Guess what? Pretend it's Play-Doh. There's no right or wrong answer. I'm trying to make a long kind of, cylinder of bread. That's all that I'm doing. So I'm gonna take this, you can see, and now I'm gonna fold it almost all the way to the edge, okay? I'm gonna lightly press it in, right? Just like that. You see how I did that? And now I've got this really, and I'm gonna put that seam side down if I'd like. I think I can even do that twice, Chef, right? I can fold it again on the other side now. You can see I'm just folding and pinching. I don't know if you can see my fingers. I'm folding and just pinching, right? I might pop these bubbles because this isn't the proper way of doing it, but it's close. All right, so I've got this cylinder, okay? And now I'm gonna do is literally like I'm a kid. That's all it is. I'm a kid anyway, right? I'm gonna lightly just kind of roll this thing out. You see how I'm doing this? And I'm kind of pressing out as I roll. So simple, right? I might take these edges, the ends, if I feel like it. Just lightly press and roll. You guys with me? It looks pretty good. It's getting there. I'll do this. I'm not like wailing it down. I'm lightly just pressing it out. And this is probably about 12 inches now. I know my steel's 16, so I can go longer if I want. And I've kind of shaped my baguette. Isn't that pretty? You guys can see like a close-up of that. Actually, it's the wrong way. Let me go this way. Bear with me for 1 sec. You can see I've got my form here, kind of formed it. It's elastic because I didn't do this exactly properly, but essentially, that's it, right? And now you see these if I'm going to do a few of these, I can take my my linens, just place it in my linen and let it chill out here for a few minutes. I'll try to put that seam side down, and I can bulk this up like this. And now I've got my baguettes kind of chilling out here for a few minutes. Let them rest for 20 minutes. Then we're going to bake them. And before we bake these, I might want to create some steam. I can take my ice cubes, put them in my oven, give them a little head start. And then I need to get my steam. And then I need to, before I launch, I need to score. Scoring means those little lines that you see in your bread, okay? They actually have certain, they have razor blade versions of this. I've seen some chefs use scissors. I like these knives, serrated knives, right? These actually cut really sharp. So I would literally just score it. I'll try to come close here. You guys can see what I'm doing. Yeah, that's not very good. How's that? And I'm just gonna just go inside of this thing and just score, boom. I'm like literally just, right? And now you can see my scores. I'll turn this again. See those scores? And now I can launch into my oven. I'm gonna do that with my peel, a little semolina flour. I'll place this on top, okay? I'm not gonna use my steam right now because it's only one of me. I launch this in my oven. There's my little mini baguette. I'll put my timer on for maybe, these take about 18 to 20 minutes. So I'm gonna put it on 10 minutes first, and then open the oven up, check it out. Maybe use my bands again underneath it, just to kind of create that, just like this, to get this. Use my band.
You want to slice that bread by any chance too?
This one right here? Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be able to leave unless we slice it.
Oh yeah, let's do it. Okay, so this is the bread here, right? Look at those holes. Isn't this awesome? This makes great bread. Dip it in olive oil, a good olive oil. It's awesome. I did make a baguette before you guys, you can see it's got nice color, bottom's cooked beautifully. It's not hot. I'm gonna heat this up and then break it up and melt some butter and dip it in there and not tell anybody. No one's here. I love it. Sound good? So baguettes, ciabatta, breadsticks.
On freezing dough versus freezing bread.
Great question. My preference would be to freeze the bread. So make your bread. I think bread freezes great because I've already got, like my yeast has already done its thing. The flavor's already done its thing. So I find if I'm gonna freeze bread, and I do this all the time with sliced bread too. It freeze it, or bagels or anything. Just freeze it. And then when you remove it, it thaws out almost in like, I don't know, 30 minutes. And then toast it. It's delicious. Anybody else have any questions for us?
Diastatic malt and pizza dough or bread dough?
Sure. Yeah, go for it. I mean, my whole thing is I don't use malt. Just experiment. Like try different things. Try different liquids. Try some milk in there. Try some beer. Try some, we've used 7-Up. We've used coffee. We just experiment. There's no right or wrong answer. Just try it and see what happens. Invent something. It's totally up to you. What else we have, Chef? Coffee. Coffee's good with bread.
Fresh versus instant yeast.
There's a conversion. I don't know it off the top of my head. We use active dry yeast, and to convert to fresh yeast, I think you just need to Google that, and they'll tell you what the conversion should be. Sorry, I can't be more specific.
Temperature inside doughs. No, we're not that fancy.
Well, yeah, that's a great question. The bread bakers, like, yes, they will check their temperatures. It's really specific. They really dial it in, and they're making really consistent loaf after loaf, right? At home, we're not doing that. Also why we say room temperature water, 24-hour bulk ferment, because everything kind of evens out. And I think pizza dough might be more forgiven than, say, what a bread aficionado might be doing, but they're really going to dial in those temperatures. Yes. But yeah, in our opinion, don't use cold water. Don't use hot water. Use room temp water. Really simple, basic math works I mean, it's gorgeous. Look at that.
Sourdough.
Great question. We need to do a sourdough class. I think that might, we just got to figure out how we can structure that. Maybe it's a series of classes on sourdough. For example, if I'm going to substitute sourdough into my yeasted dough, and I use 500 grams of flour, I'm going to now reduce that by, call it 10%, and use 450 grams of flour. And I'm going to reduce my water by the same amount, 10%. And I'm going to add my 20% of my sourdough starter into that to replace. That makes sense? Does that make sense, Chef? Did I say that right? 20% substitution into my yeasted dough. Just remove equal parts water and flour from your dough recipe. Right on. Right on.
Any question about pizza, because why not? It is bread, I guess.
Yeah, please.
If you're not using a steel but cooking it in an outdoor pizza oven, do you need to change the hydration? I don't think so.
No, I think we're already at a pretty high hydration anyway. That's a great, again, experiment and see. I'm not sure what temperature you're cooking that at. Some of those wood-fired ovens get really hot. Some cook at 500 or 600 degrees. So it really depends on what, my thing would be just experiment and see what happens. Try it out. Invite us over, we'll come over.
How long to wait before you cut into it? Let it cool down, really. I mean, a minute, maybe 30 seconds. To be honest, when I make these for the kids, I bring it in the house. It comes in hot, and I slice it up, and we just devour it with a little bit of olive oil. And believe me, we do this very often. It's so good. Last question from where is she? Miss Pamela.
Miss Pamela.
Do flour brands make a difference? When I weigh King Arthur flour equal 4 cups, another brand weighs the same as 3 cups. You want to give her a shot?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, they are not all created equal. That's another reason why we really recommend a scale. I don't think there's a shortage of scales right now, but Pam, your 4 cups are going to be different than my 4 cups, regardless of the style flour. That's why we say use, especially for bacon, I urge you to get a scale because you want to dial it in. When we design recipes, it's designed on water percentage, and you're not going to be able to eyeball that. Not even close.
Right. You might spoon your flour into the cup. You might scoop the whole flour. Might be air in there.
You might do this. That might be my cup. Chef's cup is different than my cup. So if we do it by weight, all right. In a pinch, let's say I'm on an island and there's no scales, there's no Amazon. What do? I'm going to eyeball it. And I'm going to eyeball it only based on experience. I can't eyeball that any other way. So it takes practice. But still, again, it's better than not making it. So yeah, give it a shot. Awesome, you guys. So thank you guys again for these classes. So much fun for us too. And the feedback we get, if you guys have questions or want to give us feedback, please do. We're going to post this up live on YouTube later today. So if you want to get back to it, please do. And thank you. Hope you're safe. If you need any resources on anything, flour, yeast, send us a message. Comment below. We can answer that way as well. And be great. Okay? Be legendary.